my absolute pleasure to welcome to the stage Audrey Gelman and Alyssa Mastromonaco. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, friends. Woo! Can you guys hear? Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Okay, now you can. So first, thank you all so much for coming. That light is so bright. And welcome my good pal, Audrey Gelman, the queen of community, founder of The Wing. Audrey has spent the last year and a half creating a place for women to feel empowered and safe and help one another and help them grow. And so we're here to talk about how and why she did that. So they've already done the Slido. I see the Slido thing here. But remember, submit questions so that we don't have low self-esteem at the end and think nobody thought we were interesting. Okay, Audrey, what is The Wing?
So The Wing is a network now, a growing network of co-working and community spaces for women. We opened the first of these spaces about a year and a half ago, about 3 weeks before the election of
D-Day.
Yeah. D-Day. And it has quickly grown, and now we are going to be opening our 4th location in Washington, D.C. in 2 weeks. But we get a lot of questions about what The Wing is. And The Wing is used as a co-working space during the day. So if you walk in on any weekday afternoon, you can find hundreds of women on their laptops working on projects, their new companies, their next freelance writing assignment. And at night, it becomes more of a community space. So we have dozens of events every week across our locations. We have screenings, panels, book clubs. We also have a bar, and women will meet there and get together and make new connections.
So we talked about the election, we touched on it. But you came up with this idea well before the election. It turned out that it ended up being even more prescient than we thought. But what inspired you? How did you come up with the idea?
So it was sort of twofold. The first inkling of the idea was actually because I worked in public affairs and I worked at a consulting firm, and we had an office in DC. And I would often find myself changing into a suit in the Acela bathroom that was sort of like, I would basically hit my head against the wall and then try to be putting on my contacts.
And it's is it water or is it pee on the floor? You don't
Always
know.
a big question. And so, and I sort of thought they're gonna be flying cars. Can't we find a better way of doing this? So the original idea was really more of a flexible space that women could use for changing and transitioning in between their many different commitments during the course of a workday. But then increasingly the idea became it could be a space where women could actually meet each other. And then during that period, I met my business partner, Lauren Casson, and I also met a historian named Alexis Coe, who is our in-house, The Wing's in-house historian. And Alexis had, she'd written about US presidents and a lot of different things, but she'd written her thesis about the women's club movement. And as a person that took gender studies and women's history classes in college, I was really surprised to learn that there are actually 5,000 physical women's clubs that existed in the US between around the years between 1890 and the 1920s. And then they sort of went out of fashion with, third wave feminism. And what we realized was that we were actually resurrecting that concept for contemporary women.
And I love it because it's kind of like, I'm a founding Wing member, in case anybody cared. But I feel like it's the all-female education. I wasn't brave enough to go to Smith or Mount Holyoke, and I feel like this is it's like my moment to go back and feel supported and, good about myself. Was there a moment in the first 6 months where you really felt like your Oprah aha moment, where you're like, okay, this is awesome, this is coming together, this is what I imagined?
I mean, I think that there have been moments. I think the Women's March was a big moment. I think for us as a company and watching how we could serve as sort of a gathering space for women. We had 200 women get on buses at 3 a.m. and
I was there.
Yeah, and everyone was sort of falling asleep on each other's shoulders, like women they'd never met before. And then I remember we got to it was in Delaware, and it was like a rest stop, and it was incredible because this rest stop that I think I'd been to before in Delaware almost transformed into a wing. The men's bathroom had been taken over by all women, and it was just, you looked around and it was sort of this like beautiful ecosystem that felt like it wasn't real.
And suddenly Arby's was health food.
Well, not exactly. We definitely there wasn't anywhere to get quinoa, but it was just that feeling of looking around and being like, wow, I don't know these women's names, and I've never met them personally, but I feel so affirmed just being part of this large gathering of women, and so that was a big moment for us. I think. There were moments where we have members who are Muslim. We have a member who wears hijab, and she's able to take off her hijab when she comes into the wing. And that was, there are just moments like that are powerful, where when you're like, scratching your head and have a business plan or whatever, you don't anticipate those kinds of moments.
Do you? So how many people here? Are there any wing women in the audience? That's what I'm talking about. Are there any aspiring wing women in the audience? Just asking for a friend.
I'm going to see spaces in Austin right after this. So.
So for all the people who haven't been, can you sort of take them through what the wing feels like? Like what happens inside the wing?
I call it the warm, fuzzy feeling. I think that there are a lot of members that we have who did go to women's colleges, and what they've told me is that you go to college, and I think this is true for co-ed colleges as well, and you have the library, and you have just like your sort of bubble that you live in, and then you graduate and you go out into like the big scary world, and you feel intimidated and sort of isolated from other people, and now I think with social media, we sort of have this illusion that we're connected with other people, but actually we're locally more and more isolated from one another. And so the feeling I think that people tell me that they feel, and that I even feel when I get to walk in the wing, is just that like a lot of my baggage and stress sort of like falls, and you can't really describe why. There's something that's unquantifiable about it. But there is just this warm, fuzzy feeling, and you feel sort of like everything's going to be okay, and like you're surrounded by women that make you feel like you can do anything.
Like literally surrounded on the bookshelves.
Yes.
Like that is, if you go to thewing.com and you look at it, you'll see that first they're like, what is it, color coordinated? Like
they are, yes.
So, it goes from blue to pink to red to orange, whatever, but it's all, Audrey does such a great job of featuring the work of the women who are wing members and who are our heroes and icons. And so the bookshelf is actually my favorite place to sit near. So what's your favorite spot?
The library, I think, has been, and that's part of, I think, why it feels almost like a college library environment. That was a big decision we made from the beginning, was, we wanted to be surrounded by women that had inspired us and throughout history. And so we worked with a feminist librarian who was brilliant on our first library. We worked with the Strand in New York, which is a women-owned business, on the subsequent libraries. The new location is really special because it has secret doors, which feel sort of like Hermione-esque, Harry Potter-esque. And so the all-female library combined with secret doorways is sort of like
Isn't there a Ramona Quimby phone booth?
There is. Ramona is like one of my favorite shit starters in history. and we feature, fictional women characters. I think Lisa Simpson is making a comeback, which is,
She's
awesome.
everywhere.
She's everywhere. But she was definitely one of the we had sort of a vision board at the beginning of like what kind of women inspired us, and Lisa is, animated, but definitely was one of them.
She's definitely an inspo.
Yeah.
So kind of moving into community and workplace, there's been a big shift from traditional workplace to co-working spaces. And for women entrepreneurs and women who have a side hustle, like how do you see that shift sort of manifesting?
I think there's been a huge shift in just the way that we live and work. I think people are obviously working all the time, and I think at this point we understand like the conventional office space isn't always the most conducive to both large companies that want their employees to be innovative, but obviously also for young companies that are just starting out. And I think that there's something that is really remarkable about having a space where you're not sitting in the same space every day. You can sort of choose it differently according to your mood. And then, I think that the serendipitous meetings, there's something really, really beautiful about that. I think for people whose days are very, very structured, just the fact that you can have these happenstance run-ins with people, whether it's in the bathroom or, in the cafe. And then from that, big ideas can be inspired, or like life-changing connections can happen.
It's true.
Really
I finished my book at the Wing.
We have a lot of.
It's true. T-Chen is here.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great book, and if anyone in this audience hasn't read it, it's
Thanks, girl.
hysterical and so smart, and obviously makes us all very nostalgic for a different time in this country. But yeah, we've had tons of members who've finished their books, or increasingly members who are hiring each other or starting companies. We don't have a formal incubator.
Right.
Like Y Combinator, but that again is just naturally sort of happening in this professional ecosystem. So it's been very cool to watch.
So the Wing has so many kinds of programming. I mean, everything from like learning how to read your tarot cards to how to how to hem your pants. So many things. What's the most requested type of programming? Like what are the most popular things, and what do people ask for more of?
I came to this project having worked in politics and public affairs, and so I was obviously always really interested in what was going on in Washington and local politics, but I didn't want to voice those interests onto our members because I didn't want to assume that they had the same interests as me. But politics and sort of ways to get more civically engaged and politically activated, that is really like consistently the most requested activity. I think it's interesting actually in DC, where we're opening shortly, we've seen actually a lot more requests around things like, crafting and cooking and, flower arranging, because I think that I assume the environment is just so intensely political all the time that women are looking for, ways of learning new skills and meeting new people that aren't specifically around politics.
Well, especially so around the holidays in the Flatiron at Soho, Audrey had wreath making. And so I get the email and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna sign up for this later. And within 2 hours, I was only able to be waitlisted. And so I'm like, I love that people wanna make wreaths.
Yeah.
But it is, you turn your brain off, you turn your brain off, and you just also, it's a way, I think, for women to put their phones away, sit down and just do something with your hands and talk to people that you wouldn't normally, stop on the street and be like, hey girl, what's up?
Yeah, I think that it's therapeutic in a way.
It is therapeutic.
And I think that there's everyone, part of what we're encouraging at the Wing is just the idea that if you put down your phone and meet somebody new IRL face to face, that there's value in that, and that's part of the fabric of our society that we're starting to lose in a super interconnected world. And yeah, so I mean, I think that there's, and I also think that I think that there's an assumption that to do wreath making or to do flower arranging or crafting or whatever, it's frivolous, or that's associated with sort of traditionally homemaking or traditionally female activities, and so there's something frivolous about it. And I think we've always tried to really push back on that and say that no, in fact, there's obviously artisans and incredibly talented craftswomen who have had this long tradition, and these have been some of these activities have been ways that women have made their mark in generations where it's been hard to reach representation.
It feels kind of obvious now that the Wing's been around for a year and a half, but what was sort of your moment where you're like, this should be women only, this needs to be a lady space?
I think that we definitely got a lot of interest from men who wanted to, who I think just, with men, when you tell them they can't have something, they always want it more. So that was a reason I think that men were interested in being part of the space, whether it was they were single and to meet women, or for whatever else reasons.
Oh my God, it's not Tinder.
Yeah, I think that there are so many amazing, I mean, Bumble is an incredible, female-forward app that is changing the landscape of the dating world, and there are tons of places. Basically, every other place in the world is an environment where men and women can interact in these ways. And we felt that it was really important for this to feel like a space that didn't exist anywhere else.
It really doesn't.
Yeah, we've tried to just sort of be unapologetic about that.
When you've talked in a bunch of interviews, and actually this morning on CNBC, we all sort of feel, especially, I think we probably always have, but maybe now we're more like aware of it, the need to belong. What do you think, why do you think community, the feeling of community is so important?
I mean, I think it's some of the things that we discussed. I think that there's, I think that in this highly interconnected world, we are becoming like more globally connected than ever. So we can, like click on a geotag and see what's going on, in like halfway across the world, or literally, just hundreds of thousands of miles away. But locally, I think that people are feeling more and more isolated from one another, and I think that that is the direct result of technology. And so for us, creating a space where relationships could be made was key in sort of addressing that and pushing back against it. And at the wing, we have community managers who are like almost the camp counselors. We are actually doing a camp this summer, which we're really excited about, called Camp No Man's Land. But our community managers really serve as the people who are making these connections, introducing people who they think should meet each other, who have common interests, who went to the same college, et cetera. And I think it's just not something you get anywhere else, where it's literally somebody's job to just like find you new friends.
We could all use new friends.
Yeah, and it's hard to make new friends. I think that as adults, it's intimidating, and I think that you don't know where to start. And so again, sometimes just having a mutual affiliation in common is a thing that can be disarming and can make it much easier to make a connection. And you don't have to be like, will you be my friend?
Well, and also there's just such a sort of camaraderie. So I was in London. I don't even know if I told you this story. I was in London walking down the street, and I had my wing pin on, and a woman stopped me, and she's like, do you know what that pin? I was like, yeah, it's the wing pin. She's like, do you know if there's one coming to London? And I was like, I think probably, but I don't know off the top of my head. But like out of nowhere, in the middle of a foreign country, someone's like, are you a wing woman? Yeah. And it means something. It's like, I don't know, there's like a certain sort of halo that it means. I think for me, it means that like you're accepting, right?
Yeah, I think that
that it's okay to ask on the street in London if you're a wing woman.
Right, like you can walk up to someone and start talking to them, and like they won't call the police or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, again, this mutual affiliation. Like men have had, Skull and Bones and secret societies for centuries, and obviously we're like not so secret. But I do think that you can kind of see somebody on the train that has the bag or whatever it is, and know that again you share common interests or values, and that there's this unspoken connection.
And that you like frosé.
Yeah, frosé is.
That's in the best. Yeah, there's frosé, girl. See you.
It's rosé. That's rosé.
It's rosé. Exactly. Oh yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
So here's sort of my favorite, my favorite output from the wing. Do you tell everyone a couple stories? Like I have my stories, but this is your day. Of people
we want to hear your stories
of
too.
People who have sort of met each other and have furthered themselves personally or professionally from like the bonds forged at the wing.
I think this is happening like in communities that are not the wing across the country, and there are obviously amazing women's groups that exist in basically every city in the US. The things that we've seen that have been really moving are just literally like women meeting, quitting their jobs, and starting companies together. And that is just very cool to watch, because I think that there's something, obviously it was very scary for me to quit my job and to do this, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I think that naivete in some ways is like the thing that makes you take the jump. But I think that from what we've heard, a lot of the women who are members feel like more comfortable taking professional risk, because they know that they have this, now sort of 3,000 person deep network that they can fall back on, and that there's somebody in that network who does something that they're going to need help from.
Right.
And so it's, women quitting their jobs and starting companies together. Our lawyer quit a white shoe law firm, her partner quit a white shoe law firm, and they started their law firm together, and now they are quickly expanding because they have so many new companies that are fronted by wing members that they're representing. A ton of women who are founding startups and getting investment from either members or people who know members. And that has been really cool. And women saying like, I hired my lawyer, I hired my marketing person, or my first employee. We have a digital member portal that is soon going to be a mobile app. Because even though we do believe in obviously the value of IRL connections, it does make the value of being part of a community that much better when you can access the people in it without having to physically be in the space.
Right.
And so members hiring each other through the member portal and all sorts of things like that.
I'll say that every time now I'm looking for a type of person, like someone with a skill set, I email one of the community managers and I'm like, hey, we need an illustrator. Do we have some illustrators at the wing? And they're like, they check with the person, then they send you their contact information. And so like we try to, employ wing first.
Yeah, or friends of members. I do think that in some ways our vision was also the internet has gotten too big in a way. I think that in LinkedIn's Series B deck, it was really interesting. They said sort of Internet 1.0 was searching and transacting via flat directories. So that was like Craigslist was Internet 1.0. Internet 2.0 was interacting and transacting via networks. And so obviously LinkedIn is one of them, Facebook is one of them. Now, Facebook is full of trolls and Russian, bots, and Twitter is full of Nazis, and the internet is too big. And I think our vision in some ways is that Internet 3.0 will be searching and transacting and interacting through more closed, specialized communities, because in some ways that's where people feel safe, either getting advice or taking someone's advice or hiring someone or something like that.
So we're both political. We like to call ourselves the political witches. Do you think that politics now, forever, is an important aspect of community?
I do. I mean, I think that the thing that was so different between there were obviously in 1890 and 1900 there were gentlemen's clubs where men would go and they were sort of captains of industry and they would smoke cigars and have brandy and make business deals. And then there were these women's clubs where they were like, we're going to be mobilizing around the right to vote. We're going to be establishing the modern library system. We're going to be creating shelters and raising money to provide resources to underserved communities. And so there was always, again, it may just be this fundamental difference between the genders, I don't know, but there was always an interest from the women's clubs and the women who were leading those networks around political action, around just making the world a better place and not just, kind of resting on their laurels and enjoying, a cocktail. So I think that there's a legacy for this that comes way before the wing, and I think that there are people who said, you guys should really be neutral and you shouldn't take a stand and you should try to avoid politics or not have programming that leans in that direction. And I was like, find another founder, because that's what I did before, and that's sort of what I lived and breathed. And I just think, especially in the world that we're living in right now, the idea that you could you could sort of galvanize a large gathering of women and not have certain values politically seems false to me.
But there's no litmus test for being a wing member. There's no. I mean, maybe some other groups would do better if they had some litmus tests. But for the women in the middle of the country, I mean, Audrey and the wing have been written up nearly in any magazine and newspaper and blog that you could ever want. The New York Times, Vogue, countries far and wide have written about her. But so there are a lot of people who really view the wing as this very aspirational, I want to get there. But right now there are 4 wings, right? New York, Flatiron, Dumbo in New York, DC.
There's sort of 3.5. There's 4.
What's the? Soho, sorry. Thank you. And they're coming where?
DC and LA we've announced, and then we have a bunch more that we're announcing very, very soon.
So for all those people who don't have wings nearby, how do they become part of the community? What's their window in other than just seeing beautiful photos in Vogue?
I think that there's tons of ways, and we immediately realized. I think it's almost like when you throw a birthday party and you don't think anyone's going to come,
Right.
and then in the end it always works out and you have a good time. But for us, we were just planning on having one location. We did not expect that there was going to be the enthusiasm that we've seen around the concept in general, and from cities that were never sort of on our trajectory. And so we founded a magazine called No Man's Land that we're really, really proud of, and is sort of a community artifact in the sense that women who are either members or friends of members are, the photographers, the writers, the editors, the illustrators, et cetera. And we've released our first issue with Hari Neff, who is a model and an actress. We had, Brie Larson and Tavi Gevinson. We had unpublished Nora Ephron that was part of it. So it's really special, and it's I think that there are a lot of companies that do content marketing. It really isn't like that. And so we have another issue coming out in June. What we're hoping to do is to have wings all over the country, and then looking at our app and how maybe we can open it up to create a digital membership tier so that women can access the network and then also the programming through live streaming and things like that, without actually physically being in the spaces.
So for people here, for people who are submitting questions and everything, oh, there they are. What can people do in their own communities to sort of just create that sense of community? Like people out in the country or at colleges who maybe haven't found their safe space in the library, what can they do to sort of bring their like-minded people together?
Yeah, I think that, when I went to high school, I was the head of the Foreign Film Club, and that was really cool. And now I'm hearing that at high schools, obviously in New York City, but also across the country, there are feminist clubs increasingly. And I think that it's just about sort of planting your flag. So whether it's establishing a group on Slack or a Facebook group or a Google group, or just deciding I'm the head of the feminist club or the women's club of Western Duluth or whatever, and we're gonna have this meeting, and sometimes it's really scary because nobody comes to your first meeting, but it's really important to have your second and third and fourth meeting, and that's what I'll say. I think that there's something very, very intimidating about the idea of saying you're going to do something, and we were so nervous that nobody would join, and you were literally the first person that clicked and joined.
I'm very eager.
And I was like, Alyssa Mastromonaco, join!
It's like Oprah always says, if you get something in front of you that you need to do, you should just do it right away, because if you don't, then what are you waiting for? So you're welcome. No,
Thank you.
You can thank Oprah. You can thank Oprah for my over-eager beaverness.
I really, and that's the thing. I think that we, and it could have actually been that in our first few days, actually, when we were physically open as a space, not that many people came. We were kind of maybe we need more members. That's the thing that sometimes happens. I think what's really important is just to have your second meeting and your third meeting, and to just keep spreading the word about it.
So one of my favorite panels that I ever went to, one of my favorite events at the Wing, was Women in Metal. And you had all of the women who wrote for, were in heavy metal bands, and it was really one of the most interesting conversations, because you don't think about, one of the more prevalent sort of concerns was that the level of sexism in heavy metal, which is a little bit different than others. And so I was just front row, super into it. One of my friends from Vice was on the panel. What are some of the sort of outside the box, just your favorite panels, your favorite events that you've had at the Wing?
That one was definitely up there for me. I have been a metal fan for basically my entire adult life, and was really interested. There is a ton of sort of structural sexism that exists in women who want to sort of make it in the world of heavy metal, endure just a ton of everything from just judgment to straight out abuse. And so Kim Kelly, who's the metal editor for Noisy at Vice, she hosted a panel of women who are who front and play instruments in heavy metal bands, and it was incredible. We had an all-women motorcycle gang who came to the Wing and actually brought a motorcycle into the space, which was awesome. And I'm trying to think what else was great. I mean, For me, it's those kinds of events. Like I think that there's a interpretation that you get a bunch of women in a space and they're going to be like, and they're going to be talking about hair and makeup. And I will say that I think it's really important because again, like the beauty industry is actually run by men, and the executives are all men, and we've had so many women who are doing really innovative, progressive things in the world of beauty, and always are trying to push back against those stereotypes and those beliefs. But I do think that we had stick and poke tattoos at the wing, which was awesome. We've tried to provide members with an experience that you wouldn't normally find at a co-working space, and hear from women from STEM to law to the cooking world to music, who are all kind of fighting the same fight in their fields.
You have a big event coming up in like the next 2 weeks, don't you? Who is coming to the wing?
Hillary Clinton is coming to the wing to speak, which we're very excited about.
I'm hoping there's special Hillary merch from like the wing for that week.
I don't know. It's very exciting. I mean, we've had Senator Gillibrand. Senator Warren is coming. Our first month open in D.C. Valerie Jarrett is coming, which we're really excited about. So many incredible women across the political landscape who are coming to speak. And Hillary is definitely, I think, the night of the election, there were about 300 members who were all watching together, and obviously, I think we were all there and like lived through that night. It went from being this incredibly buoyant, triumphant night where everyone had like awesome, funny T-shirts with puns on them and flags and stuff like that, and we're just like super hyped for this new world we were going to get to live in, and then it all transformed overnight. And so I think it's going to be an incredible sort of like 360 to get to have her there and to talk about the future in 2018 and where we're going.
Because we need to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Other than where we are. One thing about sort of community, which is a little bit off this kind of community, but you and your co-founder, 2 women, did you have, I have a friend who started a makeup company. She's a woman. Everyone who works at the company is a woman. And she actually hired a male COO, not because she needed one, but because it got her more meetings. And so when you guys were going out and sort of selling this idea to people, did you find that women understood it more than men? Did you have resistance? Did people not believe that there was really a place for this?
100%. I mean, we did find ultimately like some true believers, and we were really lucky, and I think had again like the privilege and the sort of network and extended network to be able to reach those people and even just get in the door. And there were people who didn't like the idea at first and then sort of warmed to it, but there were people who also just told us it was totally going to fail. There was going to be no demand for anything like this. And I think part of the problem was that there was no real precedent for it. It wasn't like the Uber of X or whatever, and so it was sort of hard. It was hard to pitch. And there was a lot of sort of like, trust me, it's going to be awesome, which is not a great pitch, for investors. I will say that what ended up happening was that we found those people, and that we built a company that operates very differently than most companies. In our senior staff meeting 2 weeks ago, we had 2 of our senior most team members who were breastfeeding in the meeting, and like right there out there in front of everyone, and
work still got done.
Yeah, well, and the sort of statistics show that more work gets done in those environments, but they're just very non-traditional. And so for me, it's like very natural and normal to be working in an environment like that. But we've had some people who've said, like, do you realize how kind of radical this is? And I think that we don't. And I think part of the naivete of like people who start companies and don't even understand how kind of like risky or different the thing they're doing is, those are the people that I think end up changing culture and doing something new.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my former White House pal, Tina Chen, who's in the front row and was the woman who brought the lactation room to the White House. Okay? That's right, T. Chen.
And who is also one of the, the leaders of the Time's Up movement and is really incredible.
And everywhere. And she's on the Vice Inclusion Board. You can't go anywhere without finding Tina the Tank, which I call her because she knows only one direction, forward.
I love that.
Okay, so it's almost Q&A time. So one thing I had, like, obviously the wing feels like a pink utopia, but it is a business, it is your job, and so like there must be hard times. And when you hit the well, first, is there like a hard time that comes to mind? Like a day when you really struggled?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that and it's interesting, like now all of a sudden it's really cool to be a woman entrepreneur or founder, and like those are the women that are getting lifted up in culture. And I think that what people don't realize is like how brutal it can be. I mean, again, I'm incredibly lucky to be doing this, and it is like a made-up job that somehow exists now. But I mean, what you don't see, and what I think of like a lot of these magazines don't tell you, and how they cover these figures, is how scary, and how scared you are. 99, 100% of the time, basically, and. I think they just, unfortunately, there isn't enough attention that's paid to the sort of the less glamorous aspects of the job. So, the legal things, the HVAC, it's just
zoning.
Yeah, zoning issues, permits. I mean, that's the stuff that I don't think like you get to hear about when you hear about like girl bosses. But it's a lot of the job, and I think you have to have a stomach for it, and also a stomach for people. I think that there's a thing that happens when your business does catch on, which is that then there's that other narrative of them wanting to sort of pull it down, and I think that happens to. I think women, unfortunately, are so much more vulnerable to that, because we want to either sort of see women succeed or see them, be pulled down and fail.
Yeah. So in those hard times, do you have like a mantra that's your North Star, like something that always gets you through that you tell yourself?
I just read a really great quote that I think was by Valerie Jarrett, which is
VJ.
Yeah, walk in the path of lightning, which I really loved. Because I think what at least my interpretation of it was really like in those moments where you're the most scared is where you're changing something, and you have to sort of summon that courage. And so courage is definitely a thing that we try to really champion among the new team members that we bring in, because there isn't totally a playbook for what we're doing, and often with the women who are starting companies at the wing, there isn't a playbook for what they're doing either.
And Valerie Jarrett's panel's at 12:30 on the other side of the building, so just in case you're curious. Well, this was good. Should we take it to the audience? Should we start asking, or like the Slido? We'll take some Slido questions. Is there one that's like?
Yeah, it says there is a wait list and an application process. How do you build an inclusive community for women built on exclusivity? Which is it's a great question. I think that there's this legacy of these clubs, the idea of a club being something that is, premised on exclusivity. And I think for us, what we were trying to do was take a model that has really worked and endured, throughout centuries. There are a lot of these, men's clubs or clubs that were founded by men that are still around today and were founded in like the 18th century, but turn it on its head. So the way that we look at applications and the lens through which we view basically everything is diversity. And so that means, diversity of background, but also professional diversity, age diversity, sort of diversity of use of the space. And so what you get ultimately is a membership base that is, super eclectic, incredibly eclectic and diverse. And that I think is so rewarding, because to me, like the most boring rooms to be in are the rooms where everyone does the same thing. And the most interesting rooms are where everyone does something totally different from one another. So having like a woman who's a counterterrorism analyst for the NYPD sitting next to, we have two now.
Yes, I'm like, I was at dinner with her, but now there are two.
Yeah, now there are two. So, and they're, women are not well represented, certainly in law enforcement. And so having, two members who do that professionally, sitting next to a physician, sitting next to an architect, sitting next to, an engineer, et cetera, a jazz musician. We have a classical music musician in the Metropolitan Opera. We have just all over the map. And that's the thing that's so cool and interesting about the community, is that not only are we looking at racial and ethnic diversity, which is, first and foremost in the way that we look at our the way that we curate the membership, but really professional diversity and increasingly age diversity. I think at first it was a lot of women who were
At first, I was the age diversity.
No, that's
okay. I wear it proudly.
No, but I think that when you start something, it's also like your immediate friends who want to support you, or else you'll get mad at them. And so we had a lot of women that like we went to college with, or et cetera, that joined at first, and so they were naturally sort of within our age range. But now we're seeing a lot of moms and daughters join together, and increasingly more women who are in their 50s and 60s who are joining.
Okay, how do you feel about the first one?
Yes, so women-only spaces can make trans women, non-binary, and gender-fluid folks feel excluded. How does the wing address this issue? So we have staff members who do not identify on the gender binary, and also members and guests as well. And so I think that for us, it's really about we want to make the wing a space that feels inclusive and safe for folks that have been underrepresented, and that means obviously cisgendered women, and it means queer, genderqueer folks and folks who don't identify on the gender spectrum.
Is there anyone here who has a question that we can see? Any hands? No? All right, we'll take it back to the Slido. Oh yeah, hi.
Yeah. The question was, how did we originally get investors, being two women, younger women co-founders, and it was really, really hard. It's one of those things where they tell you like, there's nothing, and then all at once, and that's usually how it works, because investors are sort of lemmings, and so once one person will take a bet on you, then they all want to, and then they all want to say they were the first. But what we found was just that there were a lot of people who were just like, no, it's not for us, or we don't invest it. We don't invest in physical businesses. We don't invest in anything that has like any kind of physical product or manifestation. And that was in 2015, in late 2015. And it is a totally different world today, I would say. I would say that like physical businesses that have a physical product or some sort of physical component are now looked at as like innovative and smart and sort of ahead of the curve. In 2018, when only 2.5 years ago, it was seen as just like an automatically unwise investment. I would say too, it was really about, I think, finding that champion, so somebody who really believed in you. For us, it was Julie Rice and Elizabeth Cutler from SoulCycle, who really felt like we were onto something, and they were just sort of champions of the idea and helped us with everything from meeting other investors to things like the HVAC, which is, and it's also, I would say, really great to find people who are operators or former operators rather than just professional investors, because often, operators are the people that really understand all the problems and hurdles that you're going to have to face, not just the sort of theoretical, like not just financing. And then, we raised a Series A from, traditional sort of venture investors from NEA and from Kleiner Perkins and from a few other folks. And then for our Series B, which happened only 6 months after our Series A, which was like a pretty fast, trajectory. Usually it takes a lot longer than that. My business partner was 8 months pregnant, so she was, about to pop, and and we had this thought of like, should she be on a conference call, but only from
here up,
from their shoulders up? Should we, how do we sort of how do we navigate this? And then we just kind of said like, fuck it, we're just going to lean in, and we were able to raise one of the largest Series Bs, that female founders have ever raised. Thank you.
Wasn't it the largest? She doesn't want to say, but I think it was the largest.
It's like one of the 5 or 10 largest or something. But even in the photos of when we raised the money, we were really intentional about wanting to make it very clear that she was that pregnant. And I think that was, we were again like trying to be very intentional, just because again, like I've never seen a picture like that where 2 women raise that kind of money, tens of millions of dollars, and one of them is pregnant, and it can be done.
Well, and it's like in one of there's this, if you want to read more about community, there's an incredible Fast Company article that was about the best brands being the ones that build belonging, right? And so one of the interesting stories in there is that there was a female founder who went in and she was asked this question, well, how are you going to do this with kids? You know, and these were the male sort of venture capitalists being like, how are you going to do this? And she would just look at them and be like, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. And I thought that was like the most brilliant, you know, it's like, it's like about being intentional, you know? Are there more questions on this guy?
Yeah, I can do. So how do you reach out to women who aspire to be wing women but can't afford it? Which I think is a great question. So, you know, one of the things right now that we're developing is a scholarship program. We've brought on a team member full-time to work on it, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, and the rest of now we're 60 people, but, you know, the entire company is really passionate about. And I think that often what you see from businesses, and it's not just businesses run by men, but like, again, historically, most businesses have been run by men, but is that, you know, let's say 5, 10, 20 years in is when they start a foundation or do something that, you know, has a sort of social good component to it. And, you know, we move to try to recruit somebody within our first year and to make it a priority. You know, one of the things that I'm always having to balance is creating an economically self-sustaining company with wanting to make sure that, you know, my belief systems and values are sort of imbued in every decision that we make. And that's a hard balance, and I think it's a balance that women are more sensitive to, I would say, than men. I just think so. And, you know, for us, you know, what we charge much less than what a traditional co-working space charges. And, you know, I think that it is really important to understand, like, how valuable what you've created is, and to have the guts to be able to charge, you know, either as much as you know, what's out there on the market. In our sort of case, we charge slightly less.
Well, because it shouldn't be incumbent upon you to be a philanthropy. You know, this is, it's a business, and you're allowed to be a business.
But I also think that it is important. Again, it's like the difference between those men's clubs with Cigar and Brandy and the women's clubs where they, you know, created the modern library system. Like, I think that it is important to make sure that your values are reflected in the way that the business is structured and run. And so, you know, these are going to be 100%, you know, scholarships that are 100% covered, and, you know, reaching out to women who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford a full-time membership, and to be able to, you know, bring what they're doing to the wing community and to really champion it. And to open doors both for, you know, the women that are going to be receiving the scholarships, but also for members who just want to get involved and support them.
When I had finished my book and my co-writer and I were talking about how we were going to celebrate, I was like, Lauren, what can I do for you? Like, let me do one thing. And she's like, if you could do one thing, could you just get me higher up on the wait list for wing membership? And I was like, I might be able to do a little bit better than that, but before any of the other locations had opened, the wait list for the Flatiron was thousands of people.
Yeah, and yeah, now we've had 15,000 women apply for the wing, which is,
God, I didn't even know that.
Which is neato, and not something that we expected. And one of those things where just like demand has outweighed supply, and so that was, you know, why we moved really quickly to raise capital and to be able to expand.
And also, for some of the programming at the wing, it is really sort of like reaching into the community. Like, there's a lot of sort of, like you were saying, the businesses that are run by men, it's like 10 years down the line, they're like, okay, let's give back to the people. But I mean, it's like on the agenda all the time. Sort of the packing, you did the tampon event? Wasn't there a tampon event?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, you know, like civic engagement is a huge part of what we do. Like, we have partnerships with the Lower East Side Girls Club, with the Women's Prison Initiative, with Girls Inc., with Planned Parenthood, obviously, and the ACLU, and, you know, nonprofits and organizations that we want to support, both with our dollars and just with giving them extra arms and legs to, you know, pack more boxes, you know, City Meals on Wheels, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I think that that's another thing that, again, is really requested by members of the community, is just ways to give back. And, you know, I think that it's awesome because, you know, membership obviously includes a space to work and this network that you can access, but also, you know, amazing speakers. So, you know, having Hillary Clinton, having Jennifer Lawrence a few weeks ago, which was great, and sometimes like the cost of going to see someone speak like that, or
Would be nearly equal to the membership.
Exactly. So we do believe that it's important for us to balance making sure that we can be leveling the playing field and making sure that women who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it can access it, but also sort of being proud of the value of what we're providing.
Let's see, are there any left that we haven't done? Any in person? Yeah.
I'm looking today. It's usually like it's great to hear enthusiasm from women in different cities, because that for us just makes us want to like move faster and accelerate our timeline. And so we definitely heard from a lot of like women in San Francisco, which is like obviously has a pretty broed out tech community, and just like the need for a wing there, and in Washington and places like that. So definitely also get friends of yours or anyone who might want to join to like tweet at us or send us emails and bother us.
Yes, over here. Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question was, how, like, have you tried anything that has felt forced in terms of building community, and what's been most effective? One of the great things that we do is we have breakfast almost every single day that our community managers host, and they're done by star sign and neighborhood. So there are obviously professional networking things, but then there are opportunities for women who have something in common, be it that they're like Geminis or Sagittarii, or that they both live in, Murray Hill or something like that. And it's an opportunity for them to meet, even though they wouldn't normally otherwise. We're instituting a buddy system, which we're excited to do, which is sort of like when you join an older member who's been there for longer. Well, like, someone who's been there for longer, a more experienced member will, sort of take you on as their buddy and help you, learn the ropes of the wing and introduce you to new people and things like that. I do think that it's still scary, even when the whole point of, the endeavor is to meet other people and build community, to just walk up to somebody and extend your hand. But I think that grouping people together, by like, again, like getting groups of women together who wouldn't normally meet or don't realize they have something in common, can be really effective.
There's a good question right here. It says, many brands were criticized on Women's Day for riding the wave of feminism inauthentically. How do you ensure your partners aren't using you to do this?
Yeah, I think we all saw like the upside down McDonald's W and Colonel Sanders, like Lady Sanders, or like, taking over for the day. It was really interesting. I think like something that is fascinating is that like all of a sudden people care about women, and like brands care about women, and you saw obviously an outpouring of enthusiasm and support for women on that day. And what we're trying to kind of create in the wing is an environment that feels like that every single day of the year. And I think that we do partner with brands, but they're brands that we feel share our values. And I think it's a good thing in general that like brands are waking up to the fact that this is such an important demographic that control consumer spending and make all of these decisions, and that they have to take a real interest in them. But I do think that it's unfortunate to see, I don't know, there was like the Spotify equalizer, or no, it's not Spotify. Spotify did something with Smirnoff that was called the Smirnoff equalizer. And I do think that like brands have to really be wary of just like slapping their logo on something and like coloring it pink, and then getting to say that all of a sudden it's about progress.
Anybody? Yep, right here.
Yeah, I think that so the question was just about, again, race and intersectionality, and I think that for me it's important, especially with a company that was founded by two white women, to make inclusion and diversity, again, like our #1 priority in curating and building this community. And we have full-time staff members that only work on issues of diversity and inclusion because it's their passion, and they're creating, again, the community and the world that they want to see, and it's their utopia. And for us, I would love for you guys to come and see what it looks like in the wing. It's so different than, again, like any environment that I've ever been in terms of the diversity and the representation of women who are immigrants and who are women of color. And again, that's why it's an environment that I want to be in. And so I think I'm so sensitive to those questions, and I think especially as a white woman and having a business partner who's also a white woman, I think it's so important that that we take on those questions and don't shy away from them. And we're really proud of the diversity of the community that we've built.
We have time for, go ahead.
Yeah, please do, please.
We have time for one more question. Yep.
You talked about London. I'm from Paris. Do you plan to expand also to Paris or France or Europe in general?
Yeah, so like Europe in general is Berlin, Paris. Those are all locations that we're looking at now. It was great to get to check out some of the co-working spaces in Paris because there is a really robust community of entrepreneurs and freelancers and all of that. And I think that I went to the WeWork and they were like, we're feminists, like we want to win. It was awesome. So yeah, I think it could be, I would have to pinch myself. That would be really cool.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you, Alyssa.
And on behalf of Wing Women Everywhere, thank you for our second home.
Thank you.